We're starting the economics section, which will consist of just 5 parts. Today we'll talk about what economics is, and we'll begin with the fact that we have a problem. The education system is structured in such a way that people graduate from school, sometimes even from university, and yet lack certain fundamental understandings about the world they live in and will continue to live in for some time to come. Of course, with any luck, we don't experience the shifts in thinking that are so necessary and so important, and economics is precisely that case, because no matter who you ask, no one knows what economics is, what it does, or how it relates to our everyday lives. And ideally, professional economists should be the ones clarifying all these issues because they know and understand the most. But unfortunately, professional economists are preoccupied with other questions, whether Marx should be called a Ricordian, who's right, and they're interested in overly specific issues, while almost no one talks about very simple yet fundamentally important questions. We'll discuss precisely those. So what is economics? It can be defined in terms of its function, that is, what does economics do, or what does it do? Economics is concerned with satisfying infinite desires within the context of limited resources. This definition must be remembered and boldly embraced. Of course, not just with these words, but with an understanding of them. We all have a virtually infinite number of desires. Of course, at any given moment, there may be a limited number, say 3. If we satisfy them, 3 more appear, and so on ad infinitum. This is normal, because that's how we live, that's our life, that's how humans are. The problem is a limited number of resources. At the individual level, we begin with this level, this means a limited amount of money, time, and energy, or health if you prefer. What do we want? What are our desires? We want to travel abroad, pay for education, upgrade our smartphone, and so on. First, we need to survive, and that requires food, shelter, and clothing. What are our resources? Our salary. And this is where economics comes in. On one hand, there's an infinite number of desires, on the other, a limited number of resources. And now we have to sacrifice something, or to put it less dramatically, we have to choose one thing. And we choose to survive, at least in most cases. Although theoretically, we could choose something else from this list, but then we wouldn't be able to survive. The principle and the point of this whole argument is that resources can only be directed in one direction, not all at once, because there are infinitely many such directions. Now we rise from the level of the average person to the level of the state, and absolutely nothing changes, because the state also has an infinite number of desires, or projects, if you prefer that word. It probably fits more stylistically in the state budget line. The state has a project for education, the military-industrial complex, ecology, science, and so on. And the state would very much like everything to be perfect, for classrooms to be fully staffed, roads to be perfect, pensions to be high, and so on. But this is objectively impossible, because resources are limited. Just as an ordinary person chooses one thing and simultaneously rejects another, the state chooses one area and invests in it, leaving no resources for everything else. How does this work in practice? Let's say a certain state invests heavily in the military-industrial complex, and because of this, science, for example, will suffer, although other options are possible. And then someone from the state asks with complete sincerity, why are our pensions so low? One might answer that this column of tanks is the pensions. They're just currently expressed in this way. They decided to direct resources there. The same person might ask, why are our roads so bad? This person could be pointed to the fighter jets that just flew overhead in an unknown direction. There go those roads. Those resources could have been directed there, but they were directed here. This principle will hold true everywhere. On one hand, there's a limited supply of resources, on the other, an infinite number of desires. Thus, the questions we must ask ourselves at the individual level, just as at the national level, are always the same. Questions of priorities and feasibility. We have 10,000 or 10 trillion. Where do we direct them? We can't direct them to everything at once. We must choose one direction, or at most 2. Why do we choose these directions and not others? And are these 2 or this one truly the most important? These questions are often not asked, and decisions are made based on some kind of fantasy. Things are produced, built, and purchased that are not what's actually needed, and the results are inconsistent. Today we started talking about the economy. Next time we'll talk about private property. See you later.